The city had become unbearable that spring. The constant notifications, the endless scroll of tragedy, the performative outrage that left me feeling hollowed out. By May, I knew I needed to disappear, to find something real and tangible before I lost myself completely. That's how I ended up responding to a classified ad seeking summer help on an Amish farm in rural Pennsylvania, 3 hours from anything I'd ever known and light years from the digital chaos that had been drowning me for years. My first week was all blisters and sunburn, muscles screaming from labor I hadn't known existed. Bishop Yoder, the farm's patriarch, was fair but firm, expecting work from sunrise to sunset, with only brief breaks for the simple, hearty meals his wife prepared. They had 5 children, but it was their second eldest son, Isaac, who caught my attention from the first day. He moved through that fields with quiet grace, his strong hands working methodically, dark eyes always cast downward when I looked his way. Unlike his father, who would offer occasional instruction, Isaac never spoke to me directly that first week. Not a single word. The silence between us was a presence all its own. While we worked side by side hoeing corn rows or mending fences, I could feel him watching when he thought I wasn't looking. There was something in those stolen glances. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe just the natural wariness of someone who'd been taught that outsiders brought dangerous ideas. Whatever it was, it hung in the air between us, making even the simplest tasks feel charged with unspoken questions that neither of us knew how to ask. My small room above the workshop became my sanctuary, a place where I could write in my journal by lamplight and process the strange new rhythm of this life. No electricity, no running water in my quarters, no phone reception for miles. It was exactly what I'd been seeking, this deliberate stepping out of time. Yet as the days passed, I found myself thinking less about the digital detox I'd come for, and more about those brief moments when Isaac's hand would accidentally brush mine as we passed tools back and forth, the quick intake of his breath when it happened. 2 weeks in, a summer storm rolled across the valley, too heavy for field work. Bishop Yoder assigned us to the barn, sorting seed potatoes for the next planting. For hours, Isaac and I worked in the dim light, the rain drumming on the roof above, our fingers occasionally touching as we reached for the same potato. Each time, he would pull back as if burned, murmuring, "Sorry," in that soft voice I was still getting used to hearing. It was the first day we were truly alone together, without his father or brothers within earshot. "Have you ever left Lancaster County?" I asked during a lull in our work, desperate to break the heavy silence. Isaac looked up, surprised at the direct question, then slowly shook his head. "Never had cause to," he replied. Then after a pause that stretched between us like taffy, added, "What's it like? The English world?" There was something in his voice, a hunger that went beyond mere curiosity, that made my heart beat faster. It was the question of someone who had imagined a different life in secret moments alone. That conversation opened something between us. Cautiously at first, then with growing trust, Isaac began to ask questions when we worked alone. Simple things at first: what movies were like, how subways worked, what people did at universities. I answered truthfully but carefully, sensing the dangerous territory we were entering. His community had strict rules about exposure to outside influence, and I didn't want to be responsible for planting seeds of discontent. Yet with each passing day, the questions became more personal, more revealing of the thoughts he kept hidden from his family. "Do English people choose who they marry?" he asked one evening as we finished milking, his voice so quiet I almost thought I had imagined it. When I nodded, his hand stilled on the cow's flank. "That must be strange," he continued, "to decide something so important for yourself without your family or church." But there was longing in his words, not judgment, and I recognized in that moment that Isaac had been thinking about choices, about paths not taken, for longer than I'd known him. In my 3rd week, I developed a fever, nothing serious, but enough that Mrs. Yoder insisted I rest for a day. That evening, as I lay on my narrow bed listening to the household settle into nighttime silence, my door creaked open. Isaac stood hesitantly in the doorway, a jar of some homemade remedy in his hands. "Mother said to bring this," he explained, but made no move to leave after setting it down. Instead, he lingered, shifting his weight from one foot to another. "Can I ask you something?" he finally whispered, and the vulnerability in his voice made my chest tighten. Of course, I replied, propping myself up on my elbows, trying to ignore how the lamplight cast shadows across his features, softening them. He sat cautiously on the edge of my bed, hands clasped tightly in his lap. In the English world, he began, then stopped, gathering courage. In your world, do men ever feel things for other men? The way they're supposed to feel about women? His voice trembled slightly, and he kept his eyes fixed on his hands. The question hung between us like a living thing. I measured my response carefully, aware of the weight of this moment. Yes, I said simply. They do. It's called being gay, and it's just another way of being human. Isaac nodded slowly, absorbing this, still not meeting my eyes. That word, gay, I've heard it whispered, but no one explains. When he finally looked up, there was both fear and relief in his expression. I've prayed to not feel this way since I was 14, he confessed, voice barely audible. I thought God wasn't answering. Maybe he was just saying it's not wrong. The days that followed were charged with unspoken understanding. We continued our work as before, but now there were lingering glances that neither of us looked away from, conversations that stretched into the evening hours, careful discussions about lives so different, yet emotions so similar. I told him about my first boyfriend in high school, my coming out to parents who tried but struggled to understand. He shared whispered confessions of knowing he was different, but having no words for it, of fearing discovery by his community. Our fingers began to find excuses to touch, when passing water jugs, when demonstrating how to tie a particular knot, when reaching for the same tool. Each brief contact was like electricity, innocent yet charged with meaning. I could track the progression of our connection by the way Isaac's reflexive flinch gradually transformed into a momentary pressing back, his fingers lingering against mine for heartbeats that stretched into eternity before reluctantly pulling away. One afternoon, cutting hay in the far field with no one else in sight, Isaac stopped suddenly and turned to me. Show me, he said, voice quiet but steady. Show me how English people greet someone they... He paused, searching for words. Someone they care for. I understood what he was really asking. Carefully, telegraphing each move, I stepped closer and wrapped my arms around him in a gentle embrace. He stood frozen for a long moment, then gradually relaxed, his arms coming up to return the hug with tentative pressure. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes shone with unshed tears. Oh, was all he said, but it contained worlds. The temperature rose as June deepened, the farm days growing longer and more demanding. Yet somehow, Isaac and I found moments to carve out for ourselves, volunteering together for the most distant chores, finishing our work quickly, to earn brief respites in the shade of ancient oaks. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversations a dance around the growing feeling neither of us named directly. I learned about his dreams of perhaps becoming a furniture maker like his uncle, his secret love of sketching, forbidden as graven images, his quiet observations of nature that revealed a poetic soul beneath his practical exterior. Last Friday, a broken wagon axle kept us working late in the barn, long after the rest of the family had gone to the main house for the night. As we finished the repairs by lantern light, Isaac gestured toward the hayloft ladder. It's cooler up there, he suggested, voice casual, though his eyes held questions. I nodded, following him up into the sweet-smelling darkness. We lay side by side on our backs, staring up at the roof beams, close enough that our shoulders touched. Neither spoke for a long time, the night insects providing a symphony around us. I've never felt like I belonged here, Isaac finally whispered, the darkness making confession easier. But I don't belong in your world either. I don't know where someone like me fits. The sadness in his voice made me turn toward him, finding his profile gilded by the faint moonlight coming through the slats. Maybe belonging isn't about places, I suggested softly. Maybe it's about people, finding the ones who see you, really see you. He turned then too, his face inches from mine, searching my expression. And do you see me? He asked, voice barely audible, vulnerable in a way that made my heart ache. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. His hand moved hesitantly between us, fingers just barely touching my wrist, tracing the veins there with a touch so light it might have been imagined. I've never... he started, then swallowed hard. I've never felt understood before. Not until you came here. The heat between us had nothing to do with the summer night, building with each passing second, with each shallow breath. I could feel us balanced on a precipice, years of his religious upbringing warring with something more primal, more honest. His fingers moved from my wrist to my face, tentatively tracing my cheekbone as if memorizing it by touch. I remained perfectly still, letting him explore at his own pace, afraid that any sudden movement would break the spell. The elders say that some temptations are sent to test our faith, he whispered, his fingers still trailing along my jaw. But this doesn't feel like temptation. It feels like... He searched for words, like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for years. The raw honesty in his voice undid me, and I reached up to cover his hand with mine, pressing his palm more firmly against my cheek. Our foreheads touched, breath mingling in the narrow space between us. Time seemed to stop in that hayloft, the world outside fading away, until there was nothing but the sound of our breathing and the moonlight catching in Isaac's dark eyes. When his lips finally pressed against mine, hesitant, questioning, it was like a first rain after drought, both foreign and desperately familiar. His hand trembled against my face, and I could feel his heart racing to match my own. The kiss was brief, innocent by any worldly standard, yet revolutionary in its context. When we pulled apart, I saw wonder mixed with terror in his expression. He pressed his forehead to mine again, eyes closed tight. I don't know what happens now, he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. I just know I can't go back to before. We lay there in silence, hands intertwined, both understanding that this moment had altered something fundamental between us, had set us on a path neither could have anticipated. As the night deepened around us, Isaac suddenly sat up, his expression changing as if he'd made a decision. He looked down at me, moonlight silvering the tears on his cheeks. His next words came out in a rush, as if he feared losing courage. All my life, I've been told who to be, what to believe, where my place is, he whispered urgently. But when I'm with you, I feel like maybe there's another way to be faithful, faithful to whatever God actually made me to be. He took a deep breath, and his next words stopped my heart. I think I love... The sudden beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness, casting harsh shadows across the hayloft. And there, at the top of the ladder, stood Bishop Yoder. The beam of light froze us both, time suspended in that harsh illumination. Bishop Yoder's silhouette loomed at the ladder's top, his face in shadow, but his voice carried clearly through the darkness. Isaac, the mare's foaling. Need your help in the south paddock. Just business. Nothing more. Had he seen? My heart hammered against my ribs as Isaac scrambled away from me, putting proper distance between us. Coming, father, he answered, voice admirably steady despite the tremor I could see in his hands. As Isaac descended the ladder, the bishop's light lingered a moment longer on me. You should get some rest, he said, his tone unreadable. Early start tomorrow. Then they were gone, their footsteps receding across the barn floor below. I lay back in the hay, lungs finally remembering how to work, mind racing with what had almost been discovered. What had almost been said. Isaac's unfinished sentence hung in the air between us, even in his absence. I think I love... What? Who? Me? The possibility terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Sleep eluded me that night, my small room above the workshop feeling more confining than ever. What had I done? Isaac wasn't like the Ps I dated in college, with their casual approaches to romance and heartbreak. He had been raised in a world where his feelings could cost him everything: family, community, the only home he'd ever known. I had no right to encourage something that might destroy him. Yet the memory of his tentative touch, the wonder in his eyes as our lips met, kept pushing aside my rational concerns. Morning arrived with no clarity, my head thick from lack of sleep. At breakfast, Isaac wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing intently on his porridge while his mother served fresh bread and his siblings chattered around us. Only once, as he passed me the butter, did our fingers brush. Deliberately, I realized with a jolt. His touch lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary, and though his expression remained carefully neutral, I caught the faint pink rising in his cheeks. Something tight in my chest eased slightly. Whatever second thoughts plagued me hadn't reached him. The days stretched endlessly, with Bishop Yoder assigning us to separate tasks for the first time since my arrival. Isaac was sent to help his uncles repair fencing in the north field, while I stayed behind to mend harnesses and clean tack. The separation felt deliberate, though the bishop's manner remained as impassive as ever. By mid-afternoon, doubt had crept in. Had he seen more than he let on? Was this the beginning of ensuring Isaac and I spent less time together? Just before sunset, as I finished my chores and headed toward my room, a small folded paper appeared on my pillow. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it, finding a roughly sketched map of the farm with an X marked near the creek that bordered the property. Below it, in careful script, "After evening prayers." No signature, but none was needed. I pressed the paper to my chest, heart racing with anticipation and fear. We were being reckless, but I couldn't bring myself to ignore the summons. The night air hung heavy with summer moisture as I made my way through the darkened fields, using only starlight to guide me. The creek burbled softly ahead, a silver ribbon cutting through the meadow. I spotted him before he saw me, a solitary figure perched on a fallen log, head bowed as if in prayer. For a moment I hesitated, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I could turn back now before we crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But then he looked up, his face catching the moonlight, and any thought of retreat vanished. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Isaac said when I sat beside him, leaving careful inches between us. His voice carried both relief and uncertainty. "Seemed like Father was watching me all day." I nodded, the same suspicion having followed me since morning. "Do you think he saw us?" I asked, the question that had been burning in me all day finally finding voice. Isaac shook his head slowly. "If he had, we wouldn't be speaking now. I'd already be confessing to the elders." The matter-of-factness with which he described his potential punishment made my stomach clench. Silence stretched between us, filled only by cricket song and the gentle flow of water over stones. Finally, I gathered my courage. "About what you were going to say last night, before your father came," I began, needing to address it but unsure how. Isaac tensed beside me, his profile rigid in the dim light. "Maybe it's better left unsaid," I suggested gently. "You've been sheltered your whole life. You might not understand what you're feeling, what you're risking." His head turned sharply toward me, something flashing in his eyes that I hadn't seen before, a quiet dignity, perhaps even anger. "Don't," he said, voice soft but firm. "Don't treat me like a child who doesn't know his own mind." His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers interlacing with surprising confidence. "I may not have your words for things. I may not know your world. But I know what's true inside me." The simple conviction in his voice silenced any further protest I might have made. "All my life, I've felt like I was living behind glass," he continued, gaze returning to the water. "Watching everyone else move easily through the world, knowing exactly who they are and where they belong. I prayed for guidance, for the feelings the elders said I should have." His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, a gesture so intimate it made my breath catch. "Then you arrived, and suddenly I could see myself reflected in someone else's eyes. Someone who didn't look away from what he saw." What could I say to that? Words seemed hopelessly inadequate against the raw honesty of his confession. So instead, I shifted closer, eliminating the careful distance between us. Our shoulders pressed together, warm through thin cotton shirts. "I'm afraid," I admitted quietly. "Not of this, of us, but of what it might cost you." Isaac nodded, acknowledging the danger without retreating from it. "Some prices are worth paying," he whispered, "for even a little while of feeling whole." We stayed by the creek until the moon rose high, talking in hushed voices about everything and nothing. Isaac told me of a cousin who'd left the community years ago, gone English, as they called it, and how his name was never spoken again, as if he'd died rather than chosen another path. I shared stories of my own coming out, the friends lost and found, the painful growth of learning to live authentically. As night deepened around us, words gradually gave way to silence, to the simple comfort of existing together in the darkness. "I should get back," Isaac finally murmured, though he made no move to rise. Morning comes early. But still we sat, neither willing to break the fragile bubble we'd created. When he finally turned to face me fully, moonlight silvered the planes of his face, turning him almost ethereal. I don't have words for it, he said softly, echoing our earlier conversation. I just know it feels like something true. Then he leaned forward, closing the last distance between us with a kiss that felt like coming home. This kiss was different from our first, less hesitant, more questioning. His hands came up to frame my face, calloused thumbs brushing my cheekbones with reverent care. I let him lead, responding gently, hyper-aware of each small sound he made, each subtle shift of his body toward mine. When we finally parted, his forehead pressed against mine, breath warm against my lips. Tell me this isn't wrong, he whispered, vulnerability threading through his voice. It can't be wrong to feel so right. We agreed to meet in the hayloft the following night, after the household was asleep. The intervening day passed in a blur of meaningful glances across the dinner table, fingers brushing as we worked side by side repairing a broken wheel. Each small contact sent electricity coursing through me, made more potent by the need to hide it from watchful eyes. By evening, the anticipation was almost painful, a physical ache beneath my ribs that only intensified as I waited for the appointed hour. The hayloft felt different when I climbed up that night, no longer just a workspace, but a sanctuary, our sanctuary. Isaac arrived minutes later, a blanket bundled under one arm and a small lantern in his hand. From the spring house, he explained as he spread the blanket over the hay. No one will miss it. The flame cast long shadows across the rafters as we settled side by side, close enough to feel each other's warmth but not quite touching, both suddenly shy despite everything that had passed between us. I've never spent a whole night with someone, I admitted, breaking the silence that had settled comfortably around us. Isaac's eyes widened slightly at the implication, though I'd meant nothing beyond the literal truth of the words. I just mean sleeping beside someone, waking up with them there. The clarification seemed to both relieve and disappoint him, and I realized with a start that he'd been considering possibilities I deliberately avoided thinking about, aware of his inexperience. Would you, he began, then paused, gathering courage. Would you hold me? Just that? The request, so simple and so profound, squeezed something in my chest. I nodded, shifting to make room, as he lay down beside me, his back to my chest. Carefully, I wrapped an arm around his waist, feeling the tension in his body gradually release as he adjusted to the closeness. His hand found mine, drawing it up to rest against his heart. I could feel its steady rhythm beneath my palm, slightly faster than normal but strong and sure. Sleep was impossible with him so near, every sense heightened to painful awareness. The clean scent of his hair, the warmth of his body fitting perfectly against mine, the occasional small adjustments as he settled more comfortably into our shared space. Neither of us spoke. Words seemed superfluous in the cocoon we'd created, where even breathing felt like conversation. Outside, the night creatures continued their symphony, indifferent to the small miracle taking place in their midst. Dawn found us still awake, though we'd shifted during the night to face each other, legs tangled together beneath the blanket, his head tucked beneath my chin. I dreamed about it, Isaac whispered against my collarbone, his first words in hours. About you, before we ever. He trailed off, but I understood what he meant. I didn't know what the dreams were telling me, only that I'd wake up feeling less alone. Then you come, and suddenly the dreams made sense. We reluctantly separated before the household stirred, aware that discovery would mean consequences neither of us was prepared to face. At breakfast, Isaac looked exhausted but luminous, a quiet joy radiating from him that I hoped wasn't as obvious to his family as it was to me. His mother commented on the shadows beneath his eyes, and he mumbled something about the mare's foal keeping him up. The lie came easily to him, I noticed, and wondered how many small untruths had paved his way to this moment. In the days that followed, we found every possible excuse to be alone together, volunteering for distant chores, lingering after others had gone to bed, meeting at our creek spot when the house was busy with visitors. Each encounter deepened the connection between us, a tapestry woven of shared confidences and increasingly bold touches. Isaac's natural reserve gradually gave way to a quiet confidence in my presence, as if finally allowing himself to fully inhabit his own skin. "What happens when summer ends?" he asked one evening as we lay side by side in the hayloft, fingers intertwined between us. The question I'd been dreading, the future I couldn't see clearly no matter how I tried. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I have to go back eventually. To finish school. To my life there." The words sounded hollow even to me. That other existence suddenly seeming insubstantial compared to what we'd found here. Isaac nodded, accepting this truth we'd both been avoiding. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, as if testing the words, "about going with you. Not right away, but someday." My heart stuttered painfully in my chest, equal parts elation and terror at the possibility. "Isaac, your whole life is here. Your family, your faith, everything you know." But even as I voiced the rational objections, part of me was already imagining it, what it might be like to bring him into my world, to watch him discover everything he'd only heard about in stories. "I know what I'd be giving up," he said, rolling to face me fully. "But I also know what I'd be gaining." His hand came up to trace the contours of my face in the dim light, a touch so gentle it made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. "The elders teach us that sacrifice is holy when made for the right reasons. Maybe this would be mine." The quiet certainty in his voice humbled me, made me question which of us truly understood the meaning of courage. That night, our kisses grew deeper, more searching. Bodies pressed closer, hands exploring with increasing boldness over clothing, learning the terrain of each other through fabric barriers that somehow made each touch more electric rather than less. I was achingly aware of his inexperience, carefully gauging each response, pulling back whenever I sensed uncertainty. But Isaac matched me revelation for revelation, his natural reticence giving way to a quiet hunger that both thrilled and terrified me. "Show me," he whispered against my mouth, the same words he'd used once before, but carrying new meaning now. "Show me how it could be." I understood what he was asking for. Not just physical knowledge, but emotional truth, a glimpse of the connection that might await us beyond these stolen moments. I drew back slightly, searching his face in the lantern's glow. "Are you sure? We don't have to—" He silenced me with a finger against my lips, his expression solemn but determined. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was a revelation of whispers and careful touches, of boundaries explored and respected, of discovery made sacred by the trust between us. Nothing we did would have raised eyebrows in the world I came from, yet here, in this place suspended between his reality and mine, each shared breath felt revolutionary. I guided him with gentle words, letting him set the pace, watching wonder and desire transform his features, as he experienced sensations he'd never allowed himself to imagine. Afterward, we lay tangled together. His head on my chest, my fingers combing slowly through his hair. Neither of us spoke for a long time, the only sound our gradually slowing heartbeats and the occasional rustle of hay beneath the blanket. Finally, Isaac propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me with an expression of such open tenderness it made my throat constrict. "So that's what it's supposed to feel like," he murmured, almost to himself. "Like coming home to a place you've never been before." The sound from below came without warning, a door closing, followed by footsteps on the barn floor. We froze, eyes locked in sudden panic. Isaac's hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt, his face draining of color. "They'll send me away if they find out," he whispered, fear replacing the joy that had illuminated him moments before. "To one of my uncles in Ohio, or to a counselor who specializes in fixing people like me." The desperation in his voice cut through me like a blade. I could hear the footsteps pausing, then the sound of someone checking on the horses. Not coming up, not yet, but the threat lingered. I gently reached for Isaac's hand, prizing it from its death grip on mine to lace our fingers together properly. "Then let's not get caught," I whispered back, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. We pressed our foreheads together in the darkness, breath mingling in the narrow space between us, both knowing the moment was temporary, but refusing to surrender it before we had to. The footsteps eventually receded, the danger passing as quickly as it had arrived. But something had had shifted between us, reality intruding on the world we'd built. As dawn approached and we prepared to separate once more, Isaac held me close for a final moment, his lips brushing my ear. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "even if they send me away, or when you go back to your world, remember that you gave me something no one can take away." His voice caught slightly, and he swallowed before continuing. "You gave me the truth of myself." As I slipped away in the gray pre-dawn light, those words followed me, settling somewhere deep in my chest. I turned back once to see him silhouetted in the barn doorway, watching me go. He raised one hand in farewell, the gesture containing everything we couldn't say aloud. Acknowledgement of the precipice we stood on, the impossible choices that lay ahead, and the quiet certainty that, whatever came next, neither of us would be the same as before. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadowed interior, leaving only the imprint of his touch on my skin and the weight of his trust in my hands.